Good morning. I'm here with Brian Kim, Assistant Professor of Medicine, Anesthesiology, Pathology, Immunology. Did I miss any other departments?
Nope.
In medical school? At WashU in St. Louis. And Brian is here visiting us and is going to talk about his exciting work in neuroimmunology, where he has shown that the IL-4 alpha receptor in combination with the JAKs in sensory neurons really are master regulators of itch, and obviously the translational significance of this is clear. But our purpose here this morning is not so much to talk about Brian's work. We all know about Brian's work, but to talk more about Brian, find out something about Brian, and maybe Brian will find out something about Brian. So let's begin, all right?
Sounds ready? Good. Thank you for having me.
So the first question for $50. The first question is this. From the perspective of a physician scientist, what has been the defining influences that have made you you?
Oh wow. As a person, like what has defined me
As a physician scientist.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that a very pivotal moment in my life was I've had so many great mentors, but one of them who's very close to me, who we lost very recently, was Steve Katz. And I was fortunate enough to train with him as a medical student and work in his lab. And that's where I really learned how to think deeply as a scientist, think about disease. And I think that working with Steve was just a remarkable experience in so many ways, because first and foremost, he was a man of such high integrity and who always was thinking about how can we help our patients, and how can we help our patients, and really enjoy the science in a way by always having our focus on that end. And so that's the most formative thing, and that was a big change in my career. Prior to that point, I think I viewed medicine as just me becoming a doctor, and I viewed science as a great thing, but it was a little distant to me in terms of what it could do. And what Steve really showed me is that being a physician scientist is a very dynamic thing, and there's so many things you can do that are well beyond just science and medicine.
So then, just to paraphrase, you would say then, from the perspective of who was the most influential person in your scientific thought, would be Steve Katz.
Yeah, and part of it was that I think I was very impressionable at that point in my life as well. And so I consider myself very lucky because he's influenced so many people, but to have been around him at such a formative point in my career, it's unequivocal in terms of what that did to me.
Good. Now, as a physician scientist, you've thus far very successfully navigated the somewhat shark-infested waters between bench and bedside.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to a newly minted academician entering dermatology as a assistant professor physician scientist starting his own lab?
Yeah. Well, there's so many bits of advice I would give. I would start from the perspective standpoint, which is that I think science is harder now than it's ever been, and it will probably only get harder. And I think medicine is harder now for different reasons. I think there are pressures in medicine for productivity, revenue, and I think it's just become a lot harder to be a physician scientist in the current time period because of these pressures, and none of this makes it any easier. So I think that from that perspective, and not to discourage anyone, but I think that these are uniquely challenging situations for us. But as a result, I think those are kind of the shark-infested waters of both areas. But you always have to have passion for what you do. But I think maintaining focus and knowing who you are and knowing what it is that you want to pursue because I think as a result of all of this, there are a lot of distractions, and really investing in the right ideas and investing in the right people, and not getting too, I think the distractions can often be thinking that there are some kind of shortcuts, or that you can just do things through high volume. And to be more specific, one of the best pieces of advice I got from a great immunologist, actually, I'll say her name, Yasmin Balkay, gave me a really great advice early on, the first year I started my lab, and she said, you really only need one successful student in your lab to get tenure. And I think she was 100% right, but that's not intuitive, I think, to someone who's starting out. They think they need to recruit a bunch of people and do all these fancy things, and I think that kind of focus is
well, it's sort of, if you have 10, maybe one will be good. If you have one, you're really riding a lot on just one.
You are, yeah. And in many ways, I think that advice forced me to really invest in quality and give attention, rather than let myself be distracted by mirages. Sure. That I could push buttons or something and things would happen.
You used this word earlier, and let me paraphrase the question by saying, given your tender years, you may not know the name Lefty Gomez.
I don't.
Okay, you don't. Well, let me
It rings a bell, but yeah.
Well, Lefty Gomez was an all-star Hall of Fame pitcher for the New York Yankees in the 30s.
Okay.
Besides being an outstanding pitcher, he was well known for his quotes. And his favorite quote, which I use a lot because I really believe it sums up in many respects my career, was, I'd rather be lucky than good.
Mm-hmm.
How much has luck played a role in your career, if any? We know how good you are.
Yeah.
What do you attribute anything to luck?
Yeah, it just absolutely. I attribute a lot to, so there are so many lucky things. The mentors I've met, I've been very fortunate, and so there's luck in everything. There's luck in the people that you meet. There's luck in the environment that you happen to be in. There's luck to some degree in experiments working. But I think that absolutely, and I'm very fortunate. But I only think of luck from the perspective of being grateful for being lucky. But beyond that, I feel like perseverating on luck any further becomes very dangerous.
Yeah. A lot of people say you make your own luck.
Yeah.
But that's for another time.
Right.
You've also used this word before, and I take it very seriously, and we take it very seriously here, mentoring. Now, you've been obviously very well mentored, and you yourself are a mentor. What makes a good mentor, in your opinion?
That's tough. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Well, so am I.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking you.
Yeah, I've spent so much of my time learning how to be a good mentee, actually. I think that's something I've figured out a little bit more, but now being much more in the mentor role, I think it's recognizing how different each individual is, and then try to find a way to unlock their growth. And that's, I guess that's the challenge. I haven't figured it out, but that is a big part of it.
What characteristics, or what common characteristics did your mentors have? The good ones.
Good ones. They viewed, I would say that they viewed the mentee success as their own, unequivocally. And I think the great ones also wish and expect that their mentees are even more successful than them. And I got to keep bringing up Steve Katz. He always says, if you do it right, by giving, the mentor actually gets more back than he thinks that even the mentee gets at the end of the day. Though that's not the intent, but that ends up being the result.
I would throw this one out just for your consideration. I think selflessness is probably one of the most important things as
Yeah,
you mentioned.
exactly, yeah.
And you said that, you know, your success is not judged on you necessarily, it's on your children,
Absolutely,
hopefully.
yeah.
Now here's a name that you should know, Albert St. Georgi.
Oh my gosh, no.
I'm not gonna quiz you on it, I'm gonna have to, this is educating the youth. Albert St. Georgi won the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine in the 30s, I believe it was, for isolating vitamin C and characterizing the Krebs cycle, or what was at that time, citric acid cycle.
Yeah.
He was somewhat of a maverick, and but he classified scientists into two groups: the Apollonians and the Dionysians. These are the sons of Zeus. For the Apollonian, he said, they would take an existing line of thought and carry it out to perfection. On the other hand, the Dionysian would often rely on their instinct or their gut. They worked sort of on the fringes of scientific knowledge. They oftentimes would open up a new field, and they were considered more the scientific dissenters. Parenthetically, he said that NIH clearly favored Apollonians over Dionysians.
Yeah.
Which one of those categories do you fall in?
It's interesting. I would say I'd rather be the latter.
Dionysian.
Dionysian. But I think that I am naturally wired to be the former, and so I think there's a tension there. You know, I think there's what you just. I actually wish I could be more of a maverick, more of a creative intuition burst, but I don't think that's really. Also, you know, as sexy as that is in my own mind, I don't think that that's necessarily who I am. I think that what I do is take a line of thought and make connections with existing knowledge in ways, and I think our recent work is that way. You know, IL-4 was already discovered. The sensory neuron was already discovered, but we just made a connection that was kind of that made people feel, gosh, that's so simple. How did we miss it? And I do enjoy that. That's the kind of science I always wanted to do. Was regardless of which one of these Greek mythological traits I have, that I the kind of work that I always loved. It was I'd read the paper and I go, why didn't I think of that? It's so simple. You know, that's what I always wanted.
Yeah, well, you know, it's you look back and you read and you realize that the most elegant experiments, the most insightful, were just very simplistic in many respects.
Yeah.
Okay, now the last question, and Brian already knows this question because I gave it to him last night, and you'll understand why. So Brian is a castaway on a desert island, and this is an interpretation of mine of a venerable BBC radio show called Desert Island Discs. And our castaway is on this desert island. All his immediate physical needs are taken care of: food, clothing, shelter. That's not a problem. He's going to be on this island for the rest of his life, by the way, alone. But it's up to Brian to satisfy his intellectual needs and keep from going crazy. The original show asked for 10 pieces of music, but I've only asked Brian to give me 3 pieces of music that he would take on this island and play, obviously, over and over forever. There will be 2 books on the island, one the Bible or an appropriate religious tome, and the complete works of Mark Twain. And I've asked Brian to give me 1 other book that he would take for his infinite time to read. And then finally, we're allowing Brian 1 item of luxury, but that item cannot be used to get off the island, such as a boat or a plane or something like that. And then Brian's had all night to think about this, and I suspect he hasn't been to sleep at all. So, what are your 3 pieces of music?
So my 3 pieces of music, I'd say one of them would be John Coltrane's I'm Old Fashioned. And the other would be probably Sweet Judy Blue Eyes from Crosby, Stills and Nash.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one, I don't know if I'm actually, I thought about this, but I don't know if I'm remembering. I had a third one that I had changed from what I thought before, but I think it might be, maybe for ironic twist, Island in the Sun by Weezer.
Oh, and your book, sir?
One book.
One book.
Plato's Republic.
Good, interesting. And what is your luxury item?
My luxury item would probably be a Martin, specifically Martin guitar, acoustic guitar.
D19.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much for participating in this interview, and we look forward to hearing your talk later on.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay.